You are listening to the Antler and Feather Co. podcast. All right, hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Antler and Feather Co. podcast, the podcast for new and adult onset hunters. My name's Vince, and this is a podcast where I, an unexperienced hunter, bring on people who do know a thing or two about hunting. And as I ask them questions and learn new things, I just want to pass them right along to you guys. So it's been a great week off. I took a little Rut-cation from the podcast, and unfortunately, I don't have any antlers to show for it, but I was able to put down a very large doe. So I was able to fill my freezer with nice, clean meat, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. One thing I will just say, make sure your fitness is in check. You don't have to do a lot to maintain your fitness, but once it's gone, it's gone. And dragging a deer out of the woods is no joke. My back and my legs are smoked, but I got the back straps. I'm happy. So before we hop into it, I want to tell you guys about Buzzard Roost saddles. They are the most comfortable, most adjustable saddles on the market. They can handle anything you throw at them while maintaining comfort, so you can hang in a tree all day long comfortably. It's amazing. They're the greatest saddles I've ever tried out. They are very supportive of law enforcement, first responders, military, and they're made in America in Louisiana, so I don't think you guys need to hear any more. Use code AAFP10 and get yourself 10% off your very own Buzzard Roost saddle. Also, check out our friends over at Spartan Forge. Bill has built the most comprehensive mapping and movement prediction app that the hunting industry has ever seen. The maps are unreal. The new 3D mapping he put out is just nuts. And the fact that it's right on your phone is awesome. The intel side, basically they have a bunch of data from GPS collared deer. So it's not going to tell you what days to hunt. It's just going to tell you what the deer are probably going to be doing on the days that you do go out. It's been just invaluable for me. It's just a wonderful tool for especially a new hunter to have in the woods with you. If you want to try it out, you can try it out free. And then when you want to move up to the big leagues, use code AFCO. Use it online on their website. It'll get you 20% off your subscription. All right, guys, so now back to the good stuff. I would never tell this week's guest this to his face, but he is one of my best buddies, and I've known him for many, many years, dating way back into high school, which is way further back than I'd like to think about. He is a newer hunter like I am. I think he's been hunting for a year or so longer than I have, but our paths differ. When he got into hunting, he basically went straight into the private land side of it, and when I started, I went into the public land side of it. So our strategies and the things that we've learned over the last few years have been very different. So I wanted to bring him on to just kind of talk about his perspective, and experiences as a newer hunter in the world of private land management versus mine, which is public land. So please welcome to the show, my good buddy, Tom Leechmeyer Leech. What's going on, man?
How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Hey, so I wanted to start off the show with you. Are there any wind apps that you are endorsing? I know the rut's going on, and I know that you've had great experiences with the different apps telling you wind directions. So tell us a little bit about your love for wind direction apps.
Yeah, weather.com, no sponsorship, but yeah, they're on top of things, 100% right, 2% of the time. So
kind of let everybody know, I already know this, guys, because Tom and I live close to each other, so we're always talking hunting. What happened the other day?
Yeah, so I was out, and I've done a lot of research this year trying to plan stands accordingly and make sure I go in on the best wind days, and I got myself in there for a northwest wind stand. I got in the stand, got everything unloaded, sat there, did some grunts, did some rattling in that. And I said, man, my face is starting to feel pretty cold here. And sure enough, got out the milkweed and let one go and straight south. Looked at all the apps to double check I wasn't going crazy. And every single one of them I've looked at was northwest, northwest, northwest. And that wasn't the case. And sure enough, I'm sitting there and we get a good one coming in, and good 8-pointer. I see him down low, and I said, oh, this should be good. And sits there, starts walking for a little bit, and then next thing you know, he jets off. So pretty
So
sure he definitely winded me.
are you sure? Are you
Oh
positive?
yeah, pretty positive.
Oh
Heard
man,
a
I
little grunt and a little wheeze and took off. So
yeah, Tom hunts like some people hunt. I mean, people hunt hard. And Tom has a family and a job and everything else like most of us do. And for a dude that's got all these responsibilities, he hunts very hard and he does a ton of research. We'll get into it later, some of the things that he's done. Most of us rely on like Spartan Forge or Onyx or yeah, most of us do that. But Tom has gone a whole nother level. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, it was heartbreaking when you're like, big one, big one, big one, and then nothing. I'm like, oh no.
yeah,
No.
perfect northwest setup too, where he had to come up the side of a ridge. There was no way he was going to come up where that northwest wind was going to go. And
Yeah.
sure enough, on the south wind coming at me, I knew probably should have packed it up instead of waited it out. But yeah,
Well, if you would have had if
lesson
you
learned.
yeah, if you would have had scent free wipes on you, you might have been able to get away with it. I heard that
Yeah,
those but no, I mean it's a great example of just a lesson learned and like it's totally unpredictable. The wind switches and swirls, and no matter what the apps say, there's always prevailing winds. But it can't tell you what's happening in your particular tree, and that's a frustrating part because the rest of your property could have been blowing the way it was supposed to go, but just in that area, depending on the setup, swirls that wind and you're screwed. And there's really nothing you can do about it. But so you were mentioning in Illinois, the gun hunt starts this weekend. Um, what kind of
yep.
concerns do you have with that? I know you've been having some during the rut. You've been having some pretty big boys come in on your trail cams, but you're kind of sandwiched around a lot of public or a lot of private land that gets hunted pretty hard. Are you concerned? Are you feeling pretty good about it? Either way, do you have kind of a strategy going into that weekend or?
Uh, you know, I will say basically all the stuff I'm learning, trial and error and just watching a lot of videos, taking little bits from everybody I see and trying to, piece it together as best as I can, you know. And yeah, I have a few strategies for it. I know we had mentioned kind of taught, just discussing among us, just it might be a good idea to go sit, see what, happens. I don't really take part in gun season. Um, just personally, it's not as fun for me. I got kind of big into archery, and that's kind of my jam now. I like slinging arrows,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I might sit out in Illinois. I know we can sit as long as we have a gun tag. We can sit with archery, blaze orange everything, but we can actually
Oh
still
yeah.
archery hunt. So I might do that and see kind of what the guys behind me pressure my direction. So kind of my game plan. Um, so we'll kind of see what happens. But yeah, like you were mentioning, I do have. I don't want to say like a cookie cutter private land guys next to me, but the redneck blinds set up everywhere, and I mean their food plots are acres versus my little tiny kill plots.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of dependent upon their evening food source, hitting something between the property I hunt on the way out to food. So
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that they typically are more of it's more of a gun season property like you're saying there's, jacked up trucks everywhere during that time. Now, your guys' gun season's a little bit different than ours, I think. You guys have this weekend and then it is off. And then is it the following weekend? Like it's
yeah, I
not
think
like
it's
2 straight weeks.
correct. No, yep. So it's this weekend. I want to say like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me, but and then they have a muzzleloader season too, and
Mm,
I think that's the second firearm season. I could be wrong, but I do know. I mean, the property that's behind me, that you know, they're big on muzzle loaders. Just because, just kind of seeing their aerial setup of what they have. It, I'm not sure how, the distance that they have where the deer are coming out into these plots. Yeah, I would say that they're more geared towards muzzleloader and shooting longer distances.
Yeah, classic Orange Army. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
my biggest hope for you is that they just scare the living shit out of all of those bucks that may be bedding that direction and just push them all onto your land. Because with the way your land's set up and with the way that their blinds are set up, like there's really nowhere else for those deer to go. I mean, I guess further down to, I don't know what direction is right off the top of my head. Maybe they could sneak out a side route, but it kind of seems like your land is going to be like the best safe haven for them. So I'm hoping, at least a couple big ones come on. It'd be nice if Bruce came back, guys. Bruce is a deer Tom's been following for a few years. It was kind of your first big buck that showed up, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was kind of the first big buck, and to be honest, I didn't really care a whole lot about shooting bucks or trying to shoot bucks up until, yeah, I want to say he showed up, and then I said, oh hey, this property does have some big guys getting passed through here, and yeah, so I've been following him for probably 2.5 years maybe.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind
So
of is was that moment when you first saw him or first started seeing him a few times. I feel like that was maybe the catalyst for you to take your land management a little more seriously. I feel like before you were just, I mean, Tom's a doe slayer, guys. Tom can kill a doe better than anybody I know. But I feel like when Bruce started showing up, um, that's when you really started looking into food plots, looking at what you can do to trail systems and things like that to try to set it up, to make it a nicer place for him to come through. And you've done a lot of great work to it, and I think it's really shown this year because you've had numerous big bucks, and not just like okay 2-3 year olds. Like you've had some legitimate mature bucks come through there, and I think that's a testament to all the work that you've put into that land. So I want to get into a little bit. Like I said, we don't have to get super scientific about it. If we'll see where it goes, but I want to talk about kind of what you've done to your land to make the improvements that have drawn those bucks in. Before we get to that, guys, we're going to go ahead and say a prayer real quick, and then we will jump into food plots and all the sweet stuff Tom's done to his land. So, Lord Jesus, I thank you for another day. I thank you for another opportunity to praise you, to worship you. I thank you that you came down, you put on flesh, you stood in my place. You took the nails, you took the cross, and you took the punishment that we all deserve. Because of that, like I say every week, because of that, we can have a relationship with you. We can have a relationship with the Father. So I just ask that you would use this podcast to first and foremost glorify yourself. I also thank you for Tom and for Tom's time and coming on here to talk to us about all the cool stuff he's done to his land. And just for everyone that's followed along on Instagram, Lord, I want to publicly thank you for just the absolute miracle that you've been working in my brother's life. He's making improvements at speeds that doctors just don't understand how. And I think all of us who've been praying for him, we know how. The answer is not found in any medical book. The answer is you. And so I thank you. We all continue to pray for Billy, for a full recovery for Billy, and you will be glorified through this. So I just want to thank you for all that. I want to ask that you be over the rest of this conversation, make it full of just entertainment, make it fruitful, make it fun. And I thank you for everything. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. So jumping into food plots, like I said, when Bruce kind of showed up a few years ago, that's when I noticed you actually start taking your land seriously. before that, you were just kind of hunting the land as it laid, weren't you?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, not to get too specific on it, but it was kind of a
I'll give you the guys the address in the end, so don't worry.
for a small fee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the property I hunt, there's actually a couple of them. We'll kind of get into the first property. We can do that whenever you want. But the one that I'm currently on, it was just a staging area for heavy equipment, um, and basically OSHA training with machinery and testing grounds, more or less.
It's kind of
Um,
like an urban hunting setup, actually.
it is,
I
and
mean,
it's beneficial sometimes, and other times it's not. And we will get into that a little bit more too. But yeah, it basically was just property. Um, some guys that come in there and just pour some trees down here and there, push some stuff around, and I was told by my father-in-law that I could hunt. And he said there's some big deer down there when they're running machinery. He said doesn't seem to be bothered by them, and they just run all over. So yeah, I kind of went down there the first year, and hung a few stands and jumped out, and basically none of the stands were good wins. Everything was getting bumped or on my way in, on my way out, and I finally at one point was like, all right, well, maybe I'll just sit out and see what I can see. And I think about, I think it was the first year, I just sat out wide in the open, right on a pile of stumps, and shot my first doe there.
yeah,
And you know, years of follow, same thing, pattern over and over and over, to where they just walked across the same spot. They headed out to food source, from bedding to food source, right in the evening. Almost to the fact where we could show up at 3:30, and by 4 o'clock they were jumping across the logs right in front of
yeah,
you.
yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. Um, but yeah, I didn't do a whole lot of food plotting the first year. It was just kind of just hunt as the ground laid. Um,
What actually I don't know that I've ever actually really asked you, why did you start hunting? Because we didn't, I mean, growing up, guys, we would ride BMX bikes in high school. We did all, I mean, we've done all kinds of things. We were big into CrossFit, and I wish I still was after that doe the other day, because I'm like dying. But yeah, hunting was never really a part of our lives in, since I've met you. What made you decide one day, hey, I'm going to start hunting?
Well, kind of a few things, and I don't know if you even knew this one, but actually, it was back in high school. One of our buddies, Scott. I mean, nobody will know him, but
Hmm.
Scott kind of, was a buddy's dad. Said he had some, old archery equipment, and he's like, "Yeah, you want to go have a shot at it?" And said, "Sure, I will. Give it a shot." And it was I would say probably an '80s old bear bow, solo cam, or no cam. And I ended up sitting down in the woods, don't tell the DNR. But I sat behind my parents' house, and I was like, oh, yeah, you just sit down here and shoot deer. Little did I know you had to have, licenses and tags and stuff. So
No.
that ended real quick. That was one of those things that, the guy that gave it to me said, hey, been getting out hunting or whatever? Did you get your archery tags? I said, huh? The what? And, it was one of those things where, I just didn't do enough research. It was just like, let's go shoot some arrows in my backyard and that. I did that, I don't know, one or two times, and, just wasn't for me. Just didn't feel fun or anything like that. Didn't have enough time. I was always, I don't know how these hunters sit down here for, 8 hours still. That seems like a waste of time and all this, just bad mouthing it. Years later, 2000, what, 19, I want to say 18 or 19, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Um, my wife had mentioned that she really liked, deer steaks and deer jerky. And I said, well, maybe I'll get into hunting at some point. And, we were talking, and I ended up talking to my father-in-law, and he was kind of the one that got me into it. He basically said, You want to go shoot deer? Go sit out. I got stands already all set up. You know, go sit out over a cornfield. Nobody's hunted there for, 10 years. Just stands people left over. He'd let somebody go hunt for a little while, and they just leave them, forget about them, and that was that. So yeah, he brought it up and said, "Hey, go sit out and yeah, have some fun. Go out there about 4 o'clock, and they'll be feeding on the corn at 4:30." And I did that the first time, and it was the first time I ever seen a deer come up. And sure enough, what's the first thing I did was I heard him coming up, turned my head completely around, my whole body around, and took off. And I said, "Oh man, there are deer here. That's kind of cool." And yeah, it was a lot of you know a lot of trial and error, but um, that was kind of one of the main reasons. Is I just there was some property to hunt, and he kind of told me go for it. My dad and grandpa have actually hunted, their whole lives. My dad growing up, he hunted nonstop. Deer, pheasant, quail, all kinds of different stuff. And it's just one of those hobbies that we really never got into together. Um, but obviously, I mean, that was years ago. My grandpa couldn't go anymore. He kind of quit going. Never really got me into it, but he, had all the stuff,
Yeah.
guns, and he's kind of a gun hunter, not archery. So,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of had to learn that one on my own. But yeah, it was, you know, just kind of word of mouth. People telling me, "Hey, it's kind of fun. Go for it. Sit out in the freezing cold, and shake until
It's
you get
great.
some deer come up on you."
And then you're going to shake even worse. And then you're going to try to shoot one with a bow.
Exactly. And yeah, it was, that's kind of going to the first property I hunted. It was kind of over a cornfield. Everything was set in stone. The stands were there. Basically the food plots were there. Everything was there except the knowledge I needed to know on how to shoot a deer, kill a deer, and not walk through a food plot and scare all the deer out every time I left.
Right.
So that was a fun one. I basically took a deer parcel that they'd come out during the day, and 4 or 5 times of me leaving the same way they were coming in and shooting them out of the field because I parked that direction.
Yep.
You know that turned my parcel into a nocturnal deer movement pattern real quick.
Right. Right.
So
So
lesson learned. But
so then you moved over to the one you're primarily hunting now. So you kind of talked about the first year with that. You just kind of hunted it how it was. And I mean, to be fair, uh, those logs are fairly successful. If you just want to fill a freezer, I mean, shoot, those things are about as money as if you go out 5 times. I would even say 3 times. If you sat that thing
I
three
would say
days in a row, you would for sure put a doe down. No question
maybe
asked.
more. It's I don't want to say 80%, but I'll say it's close to 80% when you're sitting out there that you're going to see some movement, whether it's 60 yards or 20 yards. You should at least see something.
Yeah. So then, okay, Bruce comes into the picture, and then where did you start with food plots? Like, where did you even, like, how did you find out about food plots, and kind of what resources did you first start learning from?
Yeah, so that's kind of one of those things. I mean, we both know each other, whether it be BMX riding when we're younger, CrossFit or weightlifting. We kind of we get a niche for something and we go in 120%. And it's what we
Obsessed.
eat, sleep, and breathe.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've done the past couple years with archery. I ended up not exactly sure how I decided to get a new bow. I think I had a buddy let me borrow one, and um, oh no, I bought one from one of our buddies and shot that for a while, and I just thought it was really fun, and I was like, hey, maybe I'll get a little bit more updated technology and see what's out there to offer, and um, so I ended up getting a newer one, and then I was kind of hooked from there. So kind of 110% into the archery side of it, the bow side and technology side of it, and then I said, well, hey, I got all this technology and got a nice bow, but do I know how to get deer? Do I know how to get deer
Mm-hmm.
into the property? And that's kind of what brought me to food plots. And the land where I'm hunting, it's kind of just a pass through, I'll say. It's kind of a transition from bedding to a food source.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a safe transition for these deer because there's no pressure and there's no stands along the way. At least there wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd thrown some stands up and I said, I need to get these deer to hold on the property a little bit more, especially during rut time and when it gets cold out, because they're all up on the food plot or, the cornfields, ag fields. And so I said, hey, let's start looking into food plots. And the first year I did it, just typical throw and go, kind of one of those lesson learns, didn't check the soil, didn't check, no fertilizer, no lime, just kind of said, hey, this was, down to dirt. Might as well
Just
throw some seed there, see what happens. I've seen seed, grow through, all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
And I mean, it did work. Some of the stuff I planted on a hill and it actually washed down to the bottom of the hill, and that's where it held all the turkey and all the deer, the whole
Yep.
entire, you know, every time I was getting camera photos, it was down on the bottom. They're eating the seed or, eating the brassicas or whatever was planted down there. Hell, it was one of those things I just went to the store and filled up a bunch of bags full of random seed and threw them all down.
Yeah.
So, but now it's kind of, I've done a lot of stuff, kind of a background on me. I do, CAD work, 3D modeling, and blueprint design. And so, first thing I did was do a 2D version of the property with property lines and everything scalable, so I could scale all the food plots and know exactly how much seed to get versus just throwing and going. And
Mm-hmm.
so this year and kind of somewhat of last year, I think, towards the end, planted a little late last year, but this year, yeah, you know, did a lot more research and actually made sure I wasn't wasting fertilizer or seed or stuff like that. So
Yeah, because
kind of
that stuff's not exactly cheap,
no,
especially.
it's not super cheap, no,
So then,
especially right now.
what? I think you planted mainly domain this year, didn't you?
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of saw them as I don't want to be that person, but I kind of like small companies or companies starting out, and usually you get a lot more. You know, I don't want to say love in the game, but it seems like it's not so like, hey, this pro shoots this and this pro throws this
Right.
down and here you go. Some of
Right.
that stuff is just add another $15 to the mix just because you got a big name. Nothing against
Yeah.
them. I mean, same thing. If you go in a company, I get it. Um, but yeah, so that was kind of my reason to throw the domain down, and I heard good things about them, and I actually did a couple test plots before I really threw it out. I have some gardens, near the house where I can kind of just keep an eye on. There, you know, not to say it's the same soil, but it's the same amount of rain, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get an idea on how they germinate in that. And man, that stuff it just took off. No soil prepper whatsoever. I just kind of stomped the ground down and scuffed it with my boot and threw it down, just like I don't want to say just like I did down there at the hunting property, but it was a good way to see how well that works. And that stuff just kind of blew up. And I said, oh, this is it from now on versus,
Yeah.
they're kind of one of the cheaper ones too, to where it's not like $40 a bag. You can get the same stuff for, 15 to 25 bucks a bag for a,
Right.
container.
So
So
that
yeah, I've kind of went with them.
yeah, and I mean, the pictures you sent me of especially the stuff up by your house, like that stuff grew in fast and it grew in thick.
Yeah.
So there's really no reason to go anywhere else for that. Not, I mean, we don't have anything to do with domain. I would love to, but just what I've seen from just customers and then in person with your stuff. If you're looking to get into food plots next season, I personally would recommend them just from what I've seen from your properties.
Yeah.
Um,
It's kind of one of those things too. And I will mention that, I've used some of those other ones, the name brand. I guess they're all name brand, but the kind of more
Big
popular
name.
name brand ones.
Yeah.
And I, I'll say they're a little bit more temperamental, meaning, you got to have your pH in the soil right. You got to have the right fertilizer down and that domain stuff. I mean, yeah, you still want to do the same thing, but it seemed like, if I was off a little bit or didn't have fertilizer, didn't want to go in there to fertilize because it was too, you missed the rain or whatever, it was too dry, then it didn't
Yeah.
seem to affect it more or less compared to the others. So
Where were some of the places that you kind of learned how to do all this stuff? Was it just on YouTube or
yeah, so the guy Jeff Sturgis from Whitetail Habitat Solutions, kind of watching a lot of his videos and stuff, and watching a lot of his, and then honestly, as funny as it seems, I didn't know a whole lot, even living out where I am. I didn't know a whole lot about corn harvesting, and hunting grounds, and you know, tilling soil up and all this stuff. Even though my father-in-law grows alfalfa and hay
right?
fields and all this other stuff. It was kind of one of those things where I said, well, hell, I should at least know a little bit about that if I'm going to be planting, things like that. So I actually just YouTubed a lot of, um, it's kind of a funny one, but I think he's called the Millennial Farmer. And
Hmm.
he's kind of a, guy our age and just starts his own farm or just kind of goes at it trial and error, just like everybody else. And, learns from things and teaches. And it's kind of cool
Yeah.
learning and actually, knowing a little bit about, oh, okay, when are they going to cut the corn down so I can go out and hunt some of these fields? It's kind of
Right.
like I just waited for the dates. Now you can kind of plan a little accordingly if
Yeah.
hey, it's going to be dry for a while. They're going to be harvesting.
Yeah.
So
Um
yeah, kind of YouTube more or less.
yeah, I think I obviously, because I have kind of cut my teeth and been stuck on public land, I don't look too much into food plots, but I did go on like a YouTube. I went down the rabbit hole one time, and that Jeff Sturgis, he does have a lot of really good information. And the one thing you haven't done, and I'm kind of curious why, you haven't installed any swimming pools for the deer like he's got. Is that something you think you're gonna do on a serious note? I guess you don't really
so
need to with that property.
so yes, I will say that it was kind of one of those things where I just couldn't see spending however much those cattle troughs are or whatever they
Yeah.
are. But I mean, heck, they're a couple $100 if you, I mean, if not more, if you get a good size one. And you know, kind of something that happened this last year. I was out with a bobcat, and I was just knocking down woods and knocking down trails, and got a little deep in a few spots with the bucket, and I noticed it when it rained. And man, did I see a lot of tracks and stuff leading up to where that little low spot filled up.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of got me into, well, heck, there's no water source at the top of this ridge. Man, I could bring a lot in, and threw a trail cam up on that, and every time it rained and that filled up, I was getting turkeys, bucks, spikes, does, and they were just going back and forth and hitting that, then dipping back into the woods.
Yeah.
So that might be something kind of at the top of the hill, where top of a ridge where there's no real water source. I might be able to drag a few ones in during the rut too, with
Yeah.
that watering hole. So I might do something like that, but I also don't understand. I mean, I know water will seep into the ground, but I think there's some other things. I can't remember the clay or whatever the heck they pour around the outer side of, I mean, strip mines and stuff, nobody's throwing, liners in a strip mine. So
Right.
why can't I dig a hole? And that's one of those things I'll probably learn on my own why you can't do
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
but
So
yeah, so that might be something I'll do.
I'm kind of curious, what are some things that you have learned so far this year? Have you learned anything that you're going to do differently next year? in preparation? What's gone good and what's not gone well?
Yeah, so stand, we have a prevailing northwest wind. I found that out probably the beginning of this year, right after we set all the stands.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of my stands are set up for a south wind.
Yeah.
And, I'll say it's good in some cases and it's good in, not in others, because obviously during this whole rut, we've had a lot of northwest prevailing winds. And so it's kind of one of those things where kind of a coin toss going in there or not. And, we'll get to that a little bit too, I'm sure. But yeah, so definitely I want to make sure I have stands set up for every wind direction. Like guy we followed, John Dudley, obviously, knock on, saw a lot of his stuff. He had a video that was have an A, B, C, D, whatever plan, not just an
Yeah.
A or B plan. And that's kind of, going into this, next hunting season, I definitely want to do that. I want to have a stand set up for every direction, so I'm not just trying to play thermals, in stands that aren't necessarily meant for a northwest wind,
Right.
and throw some more watering holes in there. Otherwise, I'll there's a couple creeks where I could, pull some water in towards the center of a little kill plot I have. Um, that, and honestly, I might throw a couple more mock scrapes up. Surprisingly enough, I didn't really think that it would do a whole lot, but it has stopped a lot of deer so far
Yeah.
on the ones that I do have. It's
Yeah.
kind of amazing things, and seeing them use it, just saying, "Hey, I put that stick there, you know, hour ago, and now we already got deer coming over and wondering what the heck's going on."
It's crazy how quick they pick
So
up on those things.
it is. It is amazing, especially the one time that watering hole came in there, that first rain. It was like, man, I went up there probably 2 days after, and there was tons and tons of tracks all around that. It's like, how do you guys know,
Yeah.
that's going to hold water there at some point? It just made the trail.
Well, and like that one particularly this year, if you guys remember way back, for those of you who've been with me for the whole time here, I had the Protect Your Penis campaign because Tom and I both got destroyed with poison ivy, and that was one of the things we did. I think we put up I think the the vine that we cut and hung for a hanging limb, I think that was covered in poison ivy. But it was
If
like,
not, it was poison ivy.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, we were sweating our butts off and like,
Oh yeah.
not worried about nothing scent related. And like that thing had to stink like person. And we hung it. And then it's like right away there's deer coming up to it within like an hour, like hours, wasn't it? Or at
Oh
least
yeah.
like,
It was. Yep. It was right away. It was that. I think that day that they were already coming over there, rubbing on it.
and I think
It was
that
like, man.
stunk. It stunk like human. And that's why
Hmm.
I question so many things. And that's why, I mean, I've we've hunted together a few times this year, and why I have this like campaign against like camouflage, because scent control is clearly there. That's clear. Yeah, yeah. Tom, unofficially sponsored by Sika. So Tom is kind of like the Antler and Feather Co. We have our semi pro staff. Tom would be like the pro staff. I think between me and him, we would be the only. And I'm out there in this like, you know, whitetails, or what is it? Some stupid brand plaid shirt, plain green pants. Like the other day at the doe.
Champion.
Yeah, Adidas and Fila. Yeah, I have like solid green pants. I had a dark brown Carhartt the other day, and I had that doe like literally 2 feet from me, and she's staring at me and nothing. I just stood still and she didn't go anywhere, and I know she smelled me too. And it's like it makes you question sometimes. Like we're like, oh, deer are so smart, and they are, but they can also be so dumb. And I wonder how often are we giving them too much credit in certain areas? But as quickly as you would say that, you then jump to your situation where that thing winded you and took off, and like there's no doubt in your mind that that's what it was. And it's like,
Mhm.
so then how do they turn around and get on this stinky sweat covered poison ivy branch an hour after we hauled it down, and there they are, no problems. And it's just
Yep.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of talk about too your trail cam strategy over your private land. You've kind of
Yeah.
grown that over the last 2 years or so. I think you're running what 430 cameras on like 20 acres.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe four acres, 20 cams per acre.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something something like that.
these deer aren't going anywhere. But no,
Yeah,
what have you tried to accomplish with that? I know if anything it's been a lot of fun to see the deer that have come through there. Um but yeah, I want you don't have to get into depth about like how you have them set up and stuff, but I really want to lead to talk about how you've used them and how you've created that elaborate spreadsheet that you created with all the data that you've collected from those.
yeah, you know, kind of again, we all have families, or loved ones that don't want us out for, a week straight and not see us for, 40 hours a week. But
We're
it's kind
good
of one of those
guys.
things. Yeah, well, it's kind of one of those things where, I got three kids at home. I don't have all day to go out and sit in stands as much as I may want to right now. I'd much rather, be at home with the kids and, helping watch them grow and having fun and stuff, especially during the week.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where, hey, how can I put more hours in, not in the woods, but to make it beneficial for me when I go in the woods, that I don't have to sit out there for a whole day sit, unless it's come rut time, and take a day off here and there. Um, so, first few years, I started with a couple trail cams and, oh, it's cool, get a deer here, there, every once in a while, and have to walk in trails, spend time going in there, pulling the cards, formatting the cards, putting them back in. And it was just seemed like it was a lot of time for me, you know, spending going in there. And, not to mention how much scent I was laying down. And that was kind of one of the main things about the property I hunt is the only scent I wanted down there was outside of the woods, not in the woods. They're used to outside of the woods with machinery and diesel fumes and whatever. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't throwing a bunch of, sign down there without them, you know, catching me every single time. So I kind of grew my trail cams, got a couple more stealth cams, and, not bad mouth and stealth cams, but, I was buying the cheaper ones, but I did notice,
They suck.
I mean, well, three out of the five, I
I
was
hunt
getting,
public land. I can say that. They suck.
yeah. Well, three out of the five I had down there, I was getting photos, and some days I was down there sitting, watching deer go by, and I go check the trail cam to see what kind of deer, or what, hey, let's go check the trail cam. Oh, wait a minute, I was down there the eighth. There's no deer on this camera,
Yeah.
and a lot of trail, a lot of tracks I was seeing and stuff like that. And it was like, all right, let's try and do something a little different here. And I actually reached out to a buddy of ours. He mentioned that he was running these Tacticams,
Mm-hmm.
and he also mentioned he was running some $400 or $500 cameras, which I
Mm-hmm.
obviously wasn't going to do. So I said,
When
I
you
don't need
shoot,
pictures of deer that bad.
yeah, when you shoot deer and have deer the size of his, I guess you
That's understandable, especially when
yeah.
you can judge deer and you want to judge deer and you know, watch them grow and get some high def photos. And I
Oh
will
yeah.
say, it is nice having those high def photos.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I kind of invested in the Tacticams, and just here and there when I get time, go grab another one and throw it in the woods. Um, so over a couple of years, yeah, I had just basically every property corner, um, where I knew deer could get in easily because of trails I made. There's stuff set up. There's basically no way on or off the property without getting caught by one of my trail cams, and I can tell the trespassers I've seen the same thing because I don't
You've
get them
had
at one end. I get them at all the ends and
yeah.
on the way to the ends.
And through.
So
You've had
and
some bold
through.
ones that have taken side by side trips right on through.
Yes, this
That was
is
like,
correct.
wasn't that right before the rut? That wasn't that long ago, was it?
Right before the rut, and I actually sat down on the bottom of the hill and waited till they came out. Didn't see them come out, and drove around until I found them. And yeah, lo and behold, that they had been told they could go down there at some point years and years ago, and apparently now they thought was a good time to go back down there since somebody'd been doing a lot of work. So
Hey, why not? You cleared plenty of trails for him to ride.
yeah, yeah, one of those
God.
things. Yep. So, but yeah, so I basically done that, and it's kiddos go to bed. I get a little free time. I can jot down, trail cam, weather, wind condition, temperature, barometric pressure, basically anything of that day. I've been trying to categorize. All right, there's a stand set up down here. I have a lot more coming through here in a southwest wind. Well, that's perfect because they're not getting behind me on a southwest wind. Um, so learning from them, and I kind of ended up leaving these run basically all summer. And every once in a while I have to go down there, clean a few weeds that would blow in front of them. But that was my biggest thing that I learned from is, yeah, you're not going to see a lot of these deer come, fall time when they transition, but it was pretty cool seeing what they do in the summer, where they bed in the summer. And, doe are pretty patternable down there to where, they're going to bed in the same spots. It's thick cover. Um, they're not as temperamental as, buck bedding. So it seemed like, hey, this is a good thing to learn from. And so I just kind of kept adding to it. And man, it's, you know, any chance I get to get another one of those cameras, I mean, it seems like kind of a excessive, there's people that don't have as many cameras as I do on 400 acres.
Yeah.
And, it's a little excessive, but man, it does, it really, um, sets a path down onto how they get from where they start from the bedding to out into the fields and on what wind conditions and what routes they take. And
Yeah,
I
and
mean, it's pretty much,
I was gonna say
yep,
you've really used those not just observationally, but like the spreadsheets and stuff that you've made,
yep,
and you guys at home can learn from this too if you're running trail cams on your private land, even public land if you want to get ballsy and not worried about getting them stolen. But your spreadsheets, he's got like literally it's every day, isn't it? Or at least
yeah, it's,
most every days, and tell him like
yep,
what all you have on that spreadsheet and then
yep.
how you use that spreadsheet to help you decide when and where you're going to go hunt.
Yeah, so I kind of started doing this more this year, but I have some footage from last year too, which has helped a ton. Mainly, it was just when I saw bucks, but this year's kind of been anything. Um, so I kind of started the spreadsheet and labeled them, you know, camera per stand, and I have a lot of them just randomly set up too, where there's no stands, just to kind of see where they're going and how they're getting in those places. Um, but I basically started off with the stand, and then I have a direction of travel. So which direction they're going? Are they heading east or west, north, south? Um, from known bedding or from food source? It's kind of what that's documenting there for me. Barometric pressure, wind direction, temperature was the main one, the high and the low of the day. And I've kind of gone a little further to where I've gone through and highlighted AM or PM movement. So each one of those is a different color. And not to say it really matters, but I had also done um, weekdays or weekends. And I had done that because a lot of the machinery and stuff and the businesses where I'm kind of by, um, they're running Monday through Friday.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to see what happens. And, I will say, a little better on the weekends, but not enough to not go down there during the weekday.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of know and when they're going down there to do work to kind of avoid that day or kind of coordinate, hey, somebody can be down here excavating a bunch of stuff, or and so I kind of basically documented all that stuff. And I mean, it's plain as can be. Don't go down there in these winds because you're not going to see anything.
Yeah.
And not to say you couldn't rattle something in during rut or pre-rut, but it's more or less. I mean, my first sit down at the stand watching the camera footage, got the perfect wind. First time down there, shot the first doe, and we had gone a couple sits I think after that, just here and there. And yeah, I mean, it's not to say you haven't seen you don't see anything. You'll see deer, but may not be what you want. But I mean, so far it's saved me a lot of time because I know, hey, if I don't have a morning with this wind and this temp, probably going to be, no matter what the hunting apps say, you know, it's probably not going to be the greatest.
Yeah.
And I do watch the hunting apps um, a fair amount. I'll say, I haven't dug into Spartan Forge as much as you have. I've kind of
Hmm.
always been on the hunt wise train just because I started with it and I
Yeah.
have all my stuff, pins and locators, and I have all my uh, geo maps, all my Google Earth maps and stuff downloaded and uploaded into there for paths
Yeah.
and trails. So it was kind of one of those things. I was just lazy, didn't want to,
Well, that's
didn't
really
want to do it.
that's really the hardest part. And that was the biggest hang up for me going to Spartan Forge was the waypoints. It's like, you compile 2 years worth of waypoints and then you're going and you got to either try to move them over or, in my case, I just kind of used both apps side by side for a little while. I would
Hmm.
use Onyx to kind of get in the area and then I'd mark it on Spartan Forge. And I really marked up a lot in Spartan Forge when I did get a chance to scout this year. But yeah, that's the biggest hang up with it. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'll say, I'm not going to talk bad about any of them. I mean, a hunt wise is a good thing. And it's, you get 100% day. Yeah, you'll see something. It just depends on, you also have to do your homework on, yeah, it's telling you got good, percent to see something, but in what stand?
right,
And you also have to compare that to what you're getting on your trail cam too.
right.
Yeah, I know that, my wind direction's going this way and you can set your wind direction in that stand. So that kind of helps. But yeah, you also have to do your homework and say, all right, well, what am I getting on my, real time footage? What am I getting on my trail cam?
Yeah.
And kind of comparing those two together and, along with the spreadsheet and stuff, it's kind of helped me a lot. And it's actually really funny because I just saw a video that Exodus, I think it's Exodus Trail Cams.
Hmm.
A guy on there had kind of done the same thing. He had ran over, I want to say like 200 and something cameras.
Jeez.
And I mean, he didn't have it documented near to what I have this one broken down to, but he had it basically to where it was just buck movement. So
Yeah.
anytime he'd see daylight bucks. And I mean, that's a good thing across the board, especially I think they're pretty close to us on where they're hunting, so Midwest area.
Hmm.
And you know, he can tell you from, you know, October, the end of October to early November, you're going to get your, pre-rut action or whatever going on, and you'll start seeing some here and there. But then you get November, the weeks right now, he's getting a lot of all the way to the 19th. I think they said they were getting a ton of daylight movement,
Yeah.
and going down that YouTube wormhole. I think right after that one, another one of Phil Robertson came up,
Oh yeah.
and he actually has handwritten books back to the 80s on his duck hunting when he's doing the same thing. He's jotting down the weather
Yeah.
and basically saying, I know I can't go and shoot a bunch of ducks, or I'm not going to see many if I go into this wind. So, I mean, a lot of people do it, but man, I would suggest if you want to learn a lot about, deer and what they're doing with, playing weather, jot as much as you can down for the day. And, some of that stuff may not matter, like the weekdays, the, cold temps. Um, some of that stuff, a lot of people I know swear by moon phase. Uh, I just kind of go by what I see there. I
Yeah.
see them moving these days, and I see a lot of patterns. Under 30 degrees with a south wind, they're moving down here a lot. Whether it
Yeah.
be a weekday, weekend.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like you're just collecting puzzle pieces, and
Hmm.
you may not have enough of the puzzle together even after one season to make it seem like it's worth continuing to do. But I mean, once you get 2 years, 3 years in, maybe all of that initial information starts making a lot more sense. It's all, it's an elaborate game that you've got to collect, like I said, puzzle pieces from all over the place. And
Yep.
sometimes it takes just one piece to make the other 50 make sense. So if you guys are going to be hunting private land and kind of doing the same thing Tom suggested, if you want to take it that seriously, um, be steadfast with taking your notes. You may not think it makes any difference for the first half of a season or the first season, but you're going to be really glad at the end of season number 2 that you have all that information from season 1 that didn't make any sense. And I
Hmm.
think that's kind of what you've started to see with what you've done. And it is interesting. It's really cool to see because, like I said, me being a primarily public land hunter, I don't run cams because I don't want to get them stolen, and I'm busy. I can't be out there all the time, and so it has been fun to watch the stuff happen on your side, and just how every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, something else happens, and you're like, oh, okay, like when you really start to pattern something. And I mean, that just makes it so much more fun because it's the hunt's fun, but I feel like it's also a lot of fun when you start figuring them out. When you're not even in the woods, but you start figuring out these plans that start to make sense. And now I think you're kind of to the point where now you can really use that information. You might not have been able to use it last year, but this year you've really been able to hone in, and kind of, that helps you decide what you want to do with food plots next year. What do you want to do different with food plots? Like you said, watching natural watering holes. Maybe next year it makes more sense to put one up there.
Hmm.
So one more thing before we get out of here, and I want to do more of a, I don't think anybody else is going to be able to do this. Maybe a few of you guys out there, but talk about your 3D topo map you've made. Like we said, guys, Tom's taking this very seriously, and his actual job lends to this quite well. So this isn't something. Here's what I'll tell you: if you guys like what Tom's about to say and you don't know how to do it, I'm going to do a shameless plug for Spartan Forge. They just released 3D mapping. It's really badass, and it's on your phone. It's not just on the online app. It's really interesting to be able to see how your terrain rolls right on your phone in the woods. But what made you want to create your own 3D topo map of
Yeah.
your property?
So that was one of those things where, I have a little bit of land uh, that I hunt. But behind me, I mean, there's 400 plus acres that they're doing just as much, if not more, than I am. And my biggest thing was, you know, it's kind of I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I kind of wanted to know, hey, what's your land look like back there with the topographical maps? Obviously, I'm not going to go in there and trespass on somebody else's land,
Right.
but I can make use of stuff that I have, like Google Earth and historical maps, and I can see, you know, not to get in too much detail, but in the fall you can see a lot of exposed trails and paths,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the stuff I jotted down to see more or less. Hey, what are they using for trail systems back there that might benefit me pulling some of those deer my direction? Or basically trying to figure out, hey, if they're going to go in there in a northwest wind, I'm going to go down in this stand because the deer are going to get pushed.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't shoot them, they're going to get pushed.
Right.
Or kind of more or less playing, kind of strategizing on what my game plan should be, when to go in these stand locations and that. So um that was kind of the main reason why I did it, was to learn where they're bedded, and why do I see deer at this time? Why do I see deer at midnight but not in the morning? So where would they be coming from? And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of started doing with that. And I said, you know what? I can't really, as much as I'd done mapping and, you know, blueprint design and that, I didn't do a whole lot of civil. Now I did surveying, I did site surveying. That was kind of one of my jobs. And then I did 3D laser scanning. So I kind of said, this would be something. Wouldn't this be cool if I could do kind of tie those together and get a good view of what's back there without actually going back there and seeing, hill country back there, And so kind of going back to my background, I was 3D CAD design, 3D modeling, rendering, and laser scans, so point clouds. And so that kind of made me say, all right, well, let's learn topographical maps. It'd be really cool to know because obviously the best hunters look at a topo map before they do anything, before they buy
Mm-hmm.
a property, before anything. Go to a topo map. They like the topo map, then they'll go to a just a Google Earth map. See a top down to see what
Yeah.
they have in there for forestry. So they have in there for coverage. And so I uh, kind of went that route and started basically pulled a scalable Google Earth image into my program that I have. I use AutoCAD and pulled it in there, traced the lines, and basically what they call is extruding. So you add a footage to each one of those lines, and you keep doing this over and over and over for each line. A lot of civil maps are every 30-foot spacing, or I think it's every 30-foot spacing is this amount distance higher or lower. So I just kind of stacked these lines up and up and up until it created a full 3D solid. So I took the entire property from, obviously I stopped where there was, houses and businesses and stuff like that, and basically used that as where I chopped my map off. Obviously, you're gonna get some stuff in there, but nothing's gonna be bedded in there. So I used that as the outline and basically just kept building this map up and up until I made a 3D map of the entire property. Now I can go in there and pinpoint locations, your benches, your saddles, your ridges, your, areas of that I think deer gonna bed, or here's some good stand locations. I rotate it back and I click the map back on so I can see, okay, now this looks like a good spot, but there's already corn planted here. Or, it's kind of one of those things where I shut the background off. So all I saw was the elevations and the ridges and everything like that. Put all these bedded, points, waypoints in there. Again, kick the map back on, and then you basically can narrow it down even further by saying, oh, I know nothing can get over here because, that's a car path or there's a
Yeah.
road going through there. And that's kind of what I did this last year. And I will say the ones that I did go to that obviously are on my property um, were solid bedding locations.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, like, a lot of good hunters, they know these things. They've been taught these things. They've learned topo maps. They've learned geographical maps and all this other stuff. I didn't. It was kind of like I won't say trial and error, but I have the resources to do something like that. I'm going to do it.
And you were really bored at work, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. Burn some time up.
Yeah. No, it really is amazing. I couldn't believe, like, when you first sent me, when you first were like, "Hey, I'm building a 3D thing." Like, I don't know what I had in mind, but I not that I doubted you could do anything, but I was like, I wonder what he's doing. And then you sent me that finished one, and I was like, what in the hell? How did you how it's still, like, even after you explaining it, it makes a little more sense. And, like, I have just the slightest bit of CAD knowledge with my job, but it turned out awesome. And not only is it was just cool to see, but, like, the way that you were able to use it, like, I think it really, like you said, put everywhere where you are, suspected good betting, and then turn on terrain map or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then narrow down like just how valuable that is. And like, that is a good thing for guys that are, trying Spartan Forge that can't quite. I'm never going to be able to make my own 3D map, but those are things that you guys can do with the technology that these companies are making. And it's made a lot of sense for Tom, and it's really cool. So I thought it was awesome. And I wanted to kind of talk about the process of how you made that. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to cut off here. We're rounding about an hour. I think we've really done a good job of kind of showing for you guys that are going down the private land route. There are a lot of things you can do, and it's, it's one of those things like it's anything else in life or hunting related where it seems too big, it seems too scary, it's too much work, you don't know how to do it. It's really a matter of doing a little research and just going out and trying. You may screw it up this year, but then next year you're going to know better. And you can kind of follow Tom's progression. And in 2-3 short years, you went from basically just a doe factory to now you're pulling in mature bucks. And it's been a lot of hard physical labor, and a lot of research, but it is doable. So if you guys are going down that route, just go for it. Give it a shot. And, at the end of the day, any improvement you make, big or small, it's still an improvement. So, hey, here, Tom is going to give us a one last minute grunt demonstration. Hey, make sure you guys are following us over on Instagram. We're at Antler Feather Co. We're also over on YouTube. That's Antler and Feather Co. with the and sign, no spaces. I still haven't figured out the perfect formula for how you can really easily find me on YouTube. I think they're trying to keep me off of it. But Antler and Feather Co. and sign, no spaces. We're also on Facebook if you guys are over there. So, hey, if you found value in this show, if you guys feel like you've learned something new that you can take into the field or the woods with you, I ask you, please subscribe, follow, like, share, rate, and review, especially on your podcast things. If you guys are rating and reviewing, that's allowing me to keep bringing great guests on here. And ultimately, the information that we can get on this show is going to make us all much more deadly hunters in the woods. So thanks again for tuning in this week. We will catch you guys next week. This is the Antler and Feather Co. podcast. You are listening to the Antler and Feather Co. podcast.